Laura's back from assignment,
Here I am. Here
and
I
Bill's
am.
here, and Jackie's
You
here.
got all three of us. The
Yeah.
gang's all here. Well,
Where were you for 2 weeks, by the way? We don't know. Jackie and I have been wondering.
I can't say.
Very good. All right,
It's
we
mystery.
won't ask.
What you don't know won't hurt you.
There you go.
Isn't that how the saying goes?
Something
Sure,
like
what
that.
you don't know won't hurt.
All right, what I want to talk about today is there is a meeting on Wednesday. 8 locations. Does it say what for immediate release? City-led.
Says date and location set for city-led
Led
forum
forum.
led by health and environmental experts.
Experts.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes. And let me read this. Then I'll leave it for you, Greg. It's breaking news.
Okay.
City of Jackson officials, in cooperation with county, state, and federal health and environmental experts, have organized a public forum to discuss lead paint risks in the Jackson community to educate citizens on the dangers associated with the element. The meeting, set for 6 p.m. Wednesday, April 13, in the Ella Sharp Museum Community Room, will feature discussions and testimony regarding lead paint risk in homes and buildings constructed before 1978, as well as an initiative pursued by Jackson leaders to combat the issue. City officials are currently working with Jackson County Health Department, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to provide lead experts at the meeting. The forum will allow write-in questions from the public. The city's proposed lead initiative, modeled after a similar 2010 effort in Detroit, would require landlords to work with a certified lead inspector to conduct a lead risk assessment on properties constructed before 1978 as part of their process to register their property with the city. The change would require landlords to disclose where lead hazards exist in the homes, if any risks associated with the property exist at all. With water tests showing high water quality within the city, experts believe lead levels in Jackson County, children younger than 6 are a result of lead paint in city homes. According to the most recent data report on childhood lead testing and elevated levels in the state's childhood lead poisoning prevention program, the city had the second highest lead levels in the state. Quote, while the city has passed water quality tests since they were required by the EPA beginning in 1992, it's more than likely that Jackson's high level of lead in children is due to its old and blighted housing stock. End quote, Public Information Officer Will Forgrave said. Quote, before we can solve this problem, we need to know specifically where these problems are coming from, and lead assessments would do that, end quote. So,
Okay.
that is open to the
Okay.
public.
Okay. When is that? Wednesday?
Wednesday at 6 p.m. at Ella Sharp Museum Community Room, Wednesday, April 13th. I'll leave that with you. Greg.
Thank you.
Did you not have that as a press release?
No.
Huh.
I don't know.
It's on their website. So let's talk about
Well,
lead. Can we or not?
yeah.
Do you not
I
want
mean,
to?
that's nothing new.
It's
Oh, I
nothing
thought
new.
this was going to be your lead story today.
It might be tomorrow. I might use that whole thing. Breaking news.
Breaking news. Did I read
To
it
me,
wrong?
to me, it smacks of too much government.
Well,
This is
our
nothing
housing
new.
stock, our
This is-
housing stock in the city of Jackson is, it's gotta be, I don't know the specific, these are my estimates, so, don't
Yeah.
make me go out and count them, but 90% of our housing stock has to be built pre-1978. Would you
Okay.
agree with that, Bill?
Well, I think that's true almost everywhere.
Yeah, that's
That's not an issue. The real issue is because of what's happened in Flint, there's a new awareness of lead hazards. That was a problem with lead in the water. What this forum apparently is trying to address is lead-based paint and the release of lead from peeling paint, renovations, etc. My concern as a lawyer representing both landlords and tenants is that you don't want to have an overreaction. You don't want a knee-jerk reaction. You do want to investigate where the problems lie and what are the best ways to address it. The federal government already addressed it to a large extent with respect to requiring every landlord and every seller of property to notify a prospective tenant or prospective purchaser of the hazards of lead-based paint. And we have federal requirements with respect to the renovations. If you renovate, more than 5 square feet, I think it is, of, I can't remember the number of square feet, but it's a very small amount. If you are disturbing lead-based paint of that amount of square footage, you have to take the appropriate precautions, not only to protect the people who are removing the lead-based paint or dealing with the lead-based paint, but also to make certain that it doesn't escape into the environment, collecting the lead-based paint dust, so that you
The
don't
chips and
contaminate.
all
Yeah,
that
right.
stuff, yeah.
So I mean, we've already addressed it at a federal level. I understand the desire to address it at a local level. You just don't want overkill. So
But didn't something just come out from the DEQ?
yeah,
There was something I passed on to you.
Yeah, the DEQ came back and issued a 2-page letter, that 3-page letter, I'm not sure what it is. At the very end, it said that all suppliers of water, municipal suppliers of water and other suppliers of water, should undertake a program to investigate whether or not their water is being properly treated, whether or not there's an issue with respect to lead water lines running from the main to the houses. What do you do about lead fixtures within the house? In other words, they were really dealing with an issue other than lead-based paint. That was the DEQ, and it was a product of what happened in Flint. So lead poisoning, lead in water, lead-based paint, those are significant issues. You just don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction to it and do things that don't have a cost-benefit associated
Well, what
with
the
them.
city has already done is they've put an ordinance for first reading a few weeks ago, or a couple meetings ago. So there's an ordinance that says that every landlord, before their next rental registration, so we would have 2 years basically, in order to do a lead risk assessment. It doesn't say lead paint, it says lead
Right,
risk.
I pointed that out
assessment.
to the city council at the meeting where they did the first reading.
Right,
The
and so that first reading's on the table right now. They haven't pushed it to a second reading yet, but all it takes is 4 council members to push it to a second
But-
reading, and then that's gonna be a requirement. And I believe as a result of doing those tests, I'm told by another landlord that those lead risk assessment tests go upward to $500 a piece.
No, that's
And then what happens if they find,
too much government.
yeah, and nobody wants a sick kid. Let's put that on the table right now.
No,
Nobody wants a sick kid.
But it's up to you. If you have kids, it's up to you to make sure what your situation is.
When we lease a property, we go through the form of disclosure, we give them the book, and I even take an extra step and describe what lead paint is and what it does. But I'm told that a lot of landlords don't do it. In fact, if a landlord doesn't disclose that, the tenant has the right to get out of the lease. You use that on behalf of your daughter in Chicago because she was never disclosed of lead paint, correct? And she got out of the
you
lease.
pronoun you're addressing me, is that what
Yeah,
you're doing?
well,
You said you.
I didn't just address
Oh,
you,
yeah,
I
people on
pointed
the
to
radio
you.
can't see that
Well,
you're
they could
pointing
if
at
they
me.
watched the video,
So,
but
no, look, we can, does the word hysteria mean anything to anybody here? Does knee-jerk mean anything to anybody? In other words, step back and figure out where the problems exist. We already know a problem exists with lead-based paint. The feds have addressed it. So if on a local level you're gonna do
That's,
something, you have to identify a problem which isn't it already addressed by the feds
That's an
or by the
old
state.
problem.
So rather than I think this ordinance is ill-advised, because why are landlords being singled out when in fact the ordinance doesn't address lead-based paint or lead-based paint or any lead hazards in non-rental property? In other words, let's step
Yeah.
back, figure out
That's
what we should
preposterous.
all be doing. Look,
It's either all or none.
lead in water can be handled not only by removing lead lines, but also by putting in filters. And it could be a filter that treats water in the entire house. It could be an end fixture, and I'm trying to think of the term here, filter, which for drinking water would remove it in drinking water. In other words, let's step back for a second. And instead of simply jumping to a conclusion without all of the scientific facts, let's get the science, Let's
Well-
figure out what the problem is and what is the best, most cost-effective way to deal with it. Because as you say, nobody wants to poison anybody with lead. The tenant doesn't want it, and the landlord, a conscientious landlord, doesn't want it, but a homeowner doesn't want it either. So it's not just a landlord-tenant issue, it's an issue which is endemic to all properties which have
and I think we have to
lead-based
look
paint
at what the
and lead
consequences.
pipes and lead fixtures.
So we might be solving one problem, but creating another problem that might even be larger or more costly to solve. And again, nobody's minimizing the effects of lead in a child.
Well, one of the
That's
things,
a horrible
one of the
thing.
things the state DEQ letter said was it wanted the municipalities to stop replacing the lead lines running from the main to the house, because in fact that was releasing lead into the water system, into the water being delivered to the end user, the occupants of the house. So, you know, this immediate reaction to replace all of those lines turns out to be one of the worst things that they could have done. So you step back, let's
So
do this
if
in
I
a
do it-
rational, conscientious, and with all deliberate speed to figure out what the
If I
problem
do a lead risk assessment and they find lead paint in the house, am I required to remediate or encapsulate?
No, the federal law right now says you have to notify the tenant or the purchaser of the prospect.
So I don't
prospective
have to do
purchaser.
anything about it other than notify?
Notify, so
I
that the
don't-
tenant and the homeowner, the prospective buyer, can take the appropriate steps to
But-
protect themselves from lead-based paint hazards. Understand, the federal law only deals with lead-based paint, doesn't deal with lead in the water.
All right, can the local municipality force me to remediate or encapsulate? Can they do an ordinance that's tougher than the
Well,
federal?
that's one thing I pointed out to the city council when I appeared before them, and they did the first reading on this one is, okay, you're having your landlords, as a part of the registration, do a lead risk assessment. Okay, your ordinance doesn't say what you do with it after that. Well, the next logical step is that you now require the landlord to remediate, and the cost to remediate can be exorbitant. I mean, if we're talking about remediation of lead-based paint, and we're talking about remediation of lead pipes, and the lead pipes may be running from the main to the lead pipes we're concerned about may be running from the main to the house. I mean, you are looking at a massive expenditure that
just to do it.
Why didn't we do it 30 years ago?
because didn't know about it.
You know, we knew about lead-based paint.
Yes, 1978 is when the
Okay.
feds banned the use of lead-based paint.
There you go.
in construction.
Well, they must have known about lead
So
in the
that's-
pipes.
Why
or
are we doing
wouldn't-
it this
Or we
year?
wouldn't be treating the water,
I just
right?
don't get it. And then it's just the landlords?
No, we're doing it this year because of
So
what
you don't
happened in
care
Flint.
about other kids?
That's an issue too.
That's preposterous.
You
Well-
should appear at the next reading of this
Well-
city council ordinance.
Well, the
get
second
up to
reading
it.
is
Bring my
not,
bucket of lead paint?
Yeah,
the
right.
second reading isn't gonna, it may not ever happen. Is that likely?
Well, how much
don't-
is a lead assessment?
Oh, they
You
can
said
run up to
$500?
$500, I'm told. Now, I have not had it quoted, but the minute it becomes a requirement, don't you think that vendors tend to up the price, right? Because
Oh.
now you have to have it done.
Absolutely.
And then you have a limited number of people who can perform those
This is
lead risk assessments.
Yeah, my bet is a lead-based
too
paint risk
much
assessment.
government.
Well, and then there's supposed to be lead in the dirt, too.
Well,
So what happens if there's lead in, what do you do about
Well, no,
that?
you're not talking about background lead that exists as background in the soils just naturally, but that's a different issue.
But
You
that's
can
all
do-
part of,
Yeah, I understand.
that's all part of it.
Is that part of the assessment?
Well, yeah, if
And-
you have lead in the dirt, little kids go out and play in the dirt and put their hands in their mouths and,
Yeah, but you can determine whether or not it's ambient or whether it's naturally occurring versus whether it's product of lead-based paint simply by taking the different levels. I take the level immediately adjacent to the house versus a level, 100 feet in the backyard, and I do the comparison. I'll know whether it's from lead-based paint or whether it's naturally occurring in the environment. That's not difficult to do. But the assessment, if I'm doing a true assessment of lead-based risk hazards within a particular property, I have to do it on the exterior. Probably have to do it on all 4 exterior walls, or however many exterior walls there are, or different paints that there may be, the trim. You gotta remember, you got lead in the caulking for the windows. What am I, it's not
well,
caulking, it's...
when you put your wood,
Putty?
Yeah, whatever you seal the
Silicone?
windows with. Yeah.
well, anyhow, so
silicone
when
is-
you put
is
your
a lead-based,
windows
but the
move,
old
that's
one's a lead.
that's one of the worst places is
Glazing.
window jams.
Lead glazing.
When
is
you're
what I'm thinking
lifting your windows up and down, it emits a little bit of a dust, and that's almost impossible to get into without replacing your windows, right? Or
Well-
sanding it down to the bare wood and starting from scratch.
This has been going on forever.
And we've got, I don't know how many properties, 15 maybe, I don't know,
Well,
10 that are,
of. I mean, the fact that
Built
something
1920.
has existed forever, I don't fault the government for wanting to investigate the problem and to do something which is rational or reasonably based.
I think you have to leave it up to the homeowner.
well, but you should have all the
may end up
players
doing
at the
that,
table.
but I agree, you have all the stakeholders sitting at the table
Right.
to discuss what the issue is and to say, hey, look, these are the problems, this is what's causing it, or these are the things that are causing it, and these are the reasonable things that you do in order to address it. Okay?
Now,
Whether
maybe
it's-
the city's gonna do something after this meeting and they'll have the stakeholders at the table, but this particular meeting is, they've got, I think, a doctor coming in from Center for Family Health, they've got the health department, HUD is gonna be there.
Nothing new. What
And I can't remember who else they said was gonna be there.
What new will you learn?
Well,
We know lead's bad.
what they need to do is they need to have landlords at the table, they need to have the people who are gonna help solve that problem at the table to come up with a reasonable way of solving it. Otherwise, they're gonna.
Why is it just landlords? I don't get that.
Yeah, nor do I. It
That
should be,
makes-
should address all properties, whether they're owner occupied or non-owner occupied. I agree. But
Yeah, I don't get it.
Because apparently you can put yourself in your own harm's way. So you could go ahead and chew on well, you're not gonna get it anyways, but you could have your grandchild of 6 years old chew on the windowsill in your own home, your choice. But for me, as a landlord, I'm renting a property, I'm making money off of that, so therefore I should take harm.
You should-
Well, but wait a second, that's what the federal law addresses. The federal law requires you as a landlord to notify the tenant, so the tenant can take exactly the same steps that the owner
Right.
of the property who occupied it would take to
And then
protect his or her children
You just
from the
But
disclose.
lead
their, but their,
Disclosure, full
their-
disclosure.
Correct.
Their fight on, or their kickback on that is that that landlords aren't doing that disclosure.
Well, just enforce
So-
the disclosure.
Yeah, but I'm just telling you what what they're saying, their comeback on that statement,
And it's a
disclosure. Well,
10,000
landlords don't do that. Well,
$10,000 fine,
consequences.
$10,000 fine for not giving the pamphlet, and the tenant has the right to get out of the lease, and the tenant, if damaged, the tenant has a right to go after the landlord. If in fact they weren't given the disclosure and the child ends up with lead poisoning, that landlord's got himself into a whole heap of trouble. So the disclosure, the federal disclosure has worked. I don't know what the statistics are on the number of landlords who don't give the pamphlet, but that would be an easier task to determine than it would be to do a lead risk assessment at $500 a pop for a house.
And you
So-
may get better landlords if you enforced the lead-based paint disclosure, as opposed to enforcing the
No.
lead risk.
Has anybody done a
Assessment.
survey or study of whether or not the tenants have been getting the pamphlet? It would be easy to do. You do a survey of landlords, you do a survey of tenants. Find out how many have in fact been giving and getting the pamphlet. Before we leave though, what we're gonna talk about next week are landlords having a blanket prohibition on renting to convicted felons, or even people with an arrest record, because HUD just issued a new directive last week on this particular subject, and we need to talk about it. I don't have time today.
Oh, heaven forbid.
It's nice to have you back, by the way. We've missed you terribly.
Well, I wouldn't have given any additional comments to your conversation last week.
Nobody could.
Right,
Greg
no,
couldn't
and
even
Jackie
get
was
it in 2
evidenced
words.
by that too, because Jackie's a pretty sharp cookie, and,
So Sharp Park Wednesday at 6 o'clock.
yeah. Yeah. Should be, I mean, if nothing else, come and listen to what the panel, they did pull together a very powerful and interesting panel, all that are gonna say lead paint, or lead has to be removed. That's what they're all gonna say, who wouldn't say that, right? But I can tell you that nobody on the panel, nobody on council right now, nobody who's gonna put this ordinance in place is a landlord. None of the money isn't coming out of their pocket.
No,
And what I
I-
see happening is,
I don't know how you can just direct
I
that
think
to
you're
a
gonna-
landlord.
I think you're gonna end up with a homeless population, because the housing in,
Landlords are gonna go bankrupt and they're gonna be homeless.
that's right. The landlords
right.
that service the low-income population won't invest this kind of money into those properties. They'll become abandoned. They'll sit there. They'll end up being demoed. And it's just going to be, you're going to have a housing issue. That's my prediction. Right, wrong, or indifferent.
Too much
And
government.
this is recorded, so we can come back and see if I'm right.
What are we talking about next one?
Talking about
Okay.
the new HUD directive regarding landlords who have a blanket prohibition against renting to convicted felons, or even a blanket prohibition against renting to anyone who has been arrested. Can't do that according to HUD, and I'll explain why.
You can call Laura at this number.
780-3800.com.